Grand Theft Auto 3 took the world by storm, game developers the industry over sought to emulate Rockstar's success with open-world crime sims. Few could match the audacity and biting satire of Grand Theft Auto, but others found their own way to stand out. Originally designed by Illusion Softworks in 2002, Mafia was a more relaxed, narrative-focused gangster epic built on the foundation of films like The Godfather and Goodfellas. Mafia was modest in its design, trading branching narratives and non-essential diversions for something a bit more dramatic and theatrical. Out of the many things I did not expect out of 2020, a built-from-the-ground-up remake of my favorite PC game was not one of them. Mafia Definitive Edition immediately carried promise, modernize an older game by introducing it to the new standards of the genre and covering it with a new, fresh coat of high-definition paint. I'm not going to belabor the point. I am impressed with this remake of Mafia, a game I spent hours and multiple playthroughs with back in the old days. It presents the same story as the original, along with the same missions that chart the rise of the player character as he gets in deep with the mob. After all this time, I was surprised by how much muscle memory I had retained for this game. Certain gameplay tricks that I learned, like shooting out a target vehicle's tires before a car chase to make the pursuit easier, were still dancing around in my head after all these years. Very little of the main story has been changed, which meant there wasn't anything to surprise me with the exception of a few gentle twists that added dimension and perspective to some of the story's major players. No, Mafia Definitive Edition is just how I remember it, and I'd be marginally upset about that if I wasn't already a fan. Like Scorsese and Coppola, Mafia offers a romanticized glimpse of organized crime at the height of Prohibition, a time in the United States when alcohol was decreed illegal, leaving enterprising businessmen like Don Salieri to secure the thirsty with a welcome product. The Chicago-inspired Lost Heaven also reels from the destructive effects of the Great Depression. With growing unemployment and people looking to find salvation at the bottom of a bottle, the mob is given rein to line their pockets and carry influence to run their lucrative empires. Tommy Angelo enters this life by being the right person in the wrong place, as his skills as a taxi driver are forcefully recruited by a pair of mafiosos trying to escape a gunfight. After driving them into safety and fetching a handsome payday as a result, Tommy is content to forget the whole thing until he is physically harassed by soldiers from the Moretti crime family. Left with no other recourse than to seek sanctuary with Don Salieri, Tommy proves to be an effective addition to the organization by helping it make lots of money. However, we know that this is a life that Tommy cannot maintain, as our first introduction to the character is actually 8 years into the future as he spills his guts to law enforcement in exchange for government protection. Tommy's life story recounts the things he's done for the good of the family, told across 20 missions that feature a whole lot of driving, intense gunfights, and plenty of introspection amongst Tommy and his two closest friends, Paulie and Sam. Very little of Mafia's design and gameplay formula have strayed from its 2002 iteration, and speaking as someone who played that game 2 or 3 times, returning to Lost Heaven was a lot like coming back home. Hangar 13 is, far as I can tell, has provided a pitch-perfect recreation of Lost Heaven and gave it a beautiful new shine. The power of modern video game hardware gives new life to the story's more dramatic settings and cutscenes through excellent weather and lighting effects that really bring out the best in these memorable scenes. The visuals also extend to the cast of characters too. The original Mafia looked as if they scanned human faces and attached them to computer-generated avatars, and while it wasn't perfect, it was effective. For the 2020 remake, the cast enjoy fully sculpted models that sport some of the best facial animations I've seen. Don Salieri in particular expresses numerous facial tics that, at the best of times, had me second-guessing what I was seeing. The Uncanny Valley makes an appearance in some of the lesser characters, but all told, I'm extremely impressed with the game's character design and animations. A lot of time was spent producing cutscenes and animating characters, and you can really see the effort.
Let's go, Lou.
Thanks. Least we could do.
Come on, let's go say hi to the Don.
Don Salieri? Yeah. He's gonna want to hear about this.
The remake greatly benefits from modern gameplay mechanics of third-person action games. Nearly 20 years ago, Mafia was a hard game because of the simulated recoil of firing a gun, enemies that were walking damage sponges, the substantial amount of damage the player receives, and large vehicles that handled like small merchant ships, which made the game's many car chase sequences rather arduous. Mafia Definitive Edition is far more playable thanks to a good cover system, analog aiming, and added quality features during car chases. As you tear down the road evading police or Mafia goons, you'll be able to navigate towards special map markers that lead to small construction zones you can pass through and leave your pursuers behind. Shooting at vehicles is made even easier thanks to an auto-aim system that targets the closest enemy vehicle. Having this ability is a godsend because I can tell you stories about the anger I experienced over losing missions just because of bad handling cars and poor precision offered by a mouse and keyboard configuration. To speak further on vehicles, driving around Lost Heaven isn't particularly exciting because the majority of cars still feel heavy and hard to control when speed is a necessity. Also, the city's police presence enforces you to follow the rules of the road. If you're caught speeding or driving recklessly, they will flag you down to issue a ticket, which hardly matters as there's no in-game currency, or arrest you depending on the severity of your crimes. What hasn't changed for the remake is the overall fragility of its main character. Tommy has a tendency to sustain heavy damage in gunfights or getting into a nasty accident, his health decreasing with surprising ferocity. It can be super easy to die during prolonged engagements if you're not paying attention. Health doesn't regenerate unless it drops to the last third of its meter, and can only be replenished by seeking out single-use first aid stations that are few and just far enough apart to make gun battles feel very high stakes. There are plenty of classic weapons to kill people with that I've never fully developed a firm hand for because aiming over the shoulder feels floaty and makes lining up headshots difficult in the heat of the moment. When the main story ends, you're kicked back to the main title screen where you can either look up all the cars you've stolen throughout the campaign, but there's no dropping Tommy back into Lost Heaven pre-final mission. Instead, a Freeride version of the game exists that lets you roam without much care, except for the police, giving you the freedom to explore and hunt down any collectibles or cars you might have missed out on. It's not much of an open world experience as you cannot revisit interior locations, nor can you hassle mafioso or shake down people. Mafia Definitive Edition might have the visuals and updated mechanics that do the game proper justice after all these years, but what hasn't changed is the lack of things to do outside the story. This remake of Mafia is a lovely redressing of a game I carry fond memories for, and to experience again in a comfortably playable fashion was a joy. Lost Heaven looks and feels vibrant and far more alive than the stark artificiality of Mafia II's Empire Bay. As far as virtual tourism is concerned, it's a nice place to visit given the diversity of locations, from the hustle and bustle of downtown to the quiet suburban life of Oakwood. The only real nitpicky thing I have else to complain about is a new licensed soundtrack that feels like it's from a completely different time than the game's setting of early to late 1930s. This is the same issue I had with Mafia II, which included tracks that weren't even written at the time of the game's setting. Also, the infamous racing mission is still a real pain in the ass because of rubber band AI that is frustrating to work with, not to mention that the entire sequence slams the brakes on the story's pacing to a harsh degree. On PC, I could easily cheat my way through by installing a mod that let me skip the race altogether, but being forced to play through it now easily makes it the game's lowest and most unfun moment. In spite of that, Mafia Definitive Edition does a great job of bringing the original game back to life, much better than the flawed remaster of Mafia II. It might lack meat on its bones due to the absence of side activities, but in its place, Hangar 13 has had the time and resources to focus on tightening up and fleshing out an already engaging gangster story. Darkstation gives Mafia the Definitive Edition 4.5 stars.